What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Blu Node Lounge. Oh, I am so excited for this show today. With me is Proper. Welcome to the show, Proper.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. You wrote an article, what was that, like 3 weeks ago? It was just titled On Ordinals. It's right here. It's underscore at Proper, everybody. So definitely give him a follow. But I really like, there's such a short attention spans here in ordinals and in Bitcoin and crypto, just on Twitter in general. And like, this was well thought out. It's a nice long article. And to me, it really sums up what a strange group that we're in here in ordinals and how we're kind of unique from every other group in really good and sometimes maybe like almost what do you call it, like we have the blinders on, like in almost kind of like myopic ways, if you will. So welcome to the show. Why don't you just give people first an overview and just let folks know who you are. Like, how did you get in ordinals? Like, how'd you get here?
Yeah, so long story short, I first found out about crypto back in, I guess, 2013 at this point. So 12 years ago, I saw an article about Dogecoin launching. And at the time, I was in high school, so I was easily impressionable and young and thought, Dogecoin, like, it's a picture of a dog. That's cool. I'm going to check it out. Ended up mining Dogecoin, and I kind of did what I guess everybody else in my position who doesn't know what they're doing would do. And I compiled a very humble portfolio of at the time the top 10, top 15, top 20 uh kind of cryptocurrencies that are out there. So, the prime coins and the original world coin and
Yeah.
next and really some of those ones that I guess some like newer interests you probably have never heard of and have long since coming on. Spent some time working in the space over the years, first at a early decentralized cloud storage project. Later from there, I would go on to work in kind of the trading infrastructure space, primarily on the retail side, but just toward the tail end, focusing more on the institutional side. And yeah, I ended up taking a break from working in the space right around the time COVID started, but still um, all of my free time thereafter was focused on the crypto space. Like I still had, huge passion for the space. So did the whole, DeFi summer stuff and um, got out EM Finance.
Nice.
Um,
I got into DeFi
and
summer that fall. And if you want to lose money, get into something that has a nickname, something, something summer, and get into it in the fall and winter. I just, in the summer, like, I completely missed that one. So, wow. So 2013. So definitely, in my opinion, OG. Um, with Dogecoin, that's interesting. Was that like 2013, 2014? Was that one that early? Was that like with Litecoin and all the other kind of garbage that came in?
so this was late 2013. And so I can't remember if Dogecoin launched in late 2013 or ended up launching early 2014, but I remember seeing an article from like something like The Verge or something like kind of a tech-oriented outlet. Um, and but so yeah, 12 years ago. It's hard to remember the exact timeline, but like literally my earliest kind of crypto memory that I still have was I was down in North Carolina looking at kind of potential colleges I wanted to attend because this was junior year of high school for me. And in my in the hotel room that we were staying in at the time, I had my laptop open and I just had it just mining Dogecoin while we were like off during the day, touring a college campus. So yeah, can't remember if it was late 2013 or early 2014 when it launched, but I mean same time frame. I mean
Yeah.
at this point, this yeah.
How awesome is that? I mean, I always give salute, like, someone who got into it that early. You got it in high school. I'm trying to get my kids into it. They get it. Like a couple of years ago, actually many years ago, I was like, okay, you have X amount of Bitcoin. And no, it's not a full Bitcoin, but I gave them both little things. And over the years, are like, wait a second, like, is the price really this of Bitcoin? And so wait, I'm like, you do the math. Like, I'm not doing it for you, you know? So it's getting them more interested, but now that they're in high school, like they're slowly starting to get it, but it's like you can lead them to water, but they've really got to make that last turn themselves. So the fact that you did in high school, and then the fact that you're mining on Doge as you're like going on college visits with friends or the parents or whatever, like how awesome is that? Like, cause if you get in the right time, like it's free money, like there's so many little airdrops, like the Bitcoin Cash. Once I was like, okay, this one's definitely not the winner. Obviously if you cashed out right away, I could have made way more, but I think I waited till it went down to like 500 or so. It was like 1200, went to like 500. I'm like, okay, this is safely not the one. So I got out, but there's so many airdrops in that time. And for someone young like you, that can be, it's certainly, I don't know if it's life-changing money, or it's certainly, well, that's 40x what I'd make on a summer job, so it just hats off to you guys.
No, I mean, it is kind of funny because when people hear 2013, I think it's easy to assume like, oh, this person like, oh, is incredibly wealthy. They've been doing all this stuff. And I'm just
Is
like,
that a
I mean,
silk
realistically,
robe he's wearing? Is that a velvet jacket? Did he just light a cigar with $100 bill? Wait a second.
exactly. But what I always tell people is, again, like, if for anybody who's at that age or like looking back at that age, if you're a junior in high school, you have no idea what the heck you're doing. And I mean, heck, I mean, even to this day, and anybody will tell you that I will say I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. Um,
I don't
and
know, dude.
yeah,
For someone who doesn't know what they're doing, like your article, I saw the evolution of your thinking, like pretty articulate, and if you have 12 years in this space, I mean, I'm 2015, so it's 10 years. And once you see two, three, four, five cycles, you don't freak out when it's down. You're like, do I have enough money to buy more? You know what I mean? Like, am I in a position to buy more, or are my bags fully packed? But you don't freak out about that. But what I loved most about your article, and we'll get into it in a second, is you basically are like, as you're in the space longer, you're not as much of a degen. You're not as much of a meme coin flipper, because it's really at the mercy of some influencer where you are not an insider in that group, and maybe you can catch a falling knife, but usually we can't. But so you get into more art, and you get into just stacking sats. You know what I mean? You get into things that are interesting and that are about the culture and the eternal nature of the culture.
no, absolutely. I would say on that note, the biggest kind of difference it makes is, yeah, as you kind of alluded to, just desensitized for the most part. I mean, to the point of at the moment, I couldn't tell you what the price of Bitcoin is, a Bitcoin is with it within like $5,000 with any reasonable level of confidence. Like it's not something
It's over 100. You know what it is. Like, even I checked in the last couple of days.
I know it's over 100, but truly, like I mean, just
Oh,
yesterday,
now I got to check.
yeah,
Ooh,
see,
it's at
exactly.
104 today. Nice.
Well, there you go. But
Nice.
I would say in general, on any given day, whether it be Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever, I generally could not tell you what the price of either is with any reasonable level of confidence. And I know to some people that probably sounds quite ignorant, but it's just the reality of like as someone who's generally an anxious person, the only thing that would do for that matter is potentially make me more anxious. So, and it's kind of just a really broad application of that's just not what I'm generally like focused on these days.
Right.
I'm not trading, I'm not like flipping, I'm not, trying to get in on hot mints, I'm not, doing all these things. And it's more so just doing things that apart from, obviously it's great to make money here and there, but that's just really is not my focus at the moment. Um, which I understand is a privilege and kind of a blessing that I'm able to do that. But I'm just happy to be here building and doing cool stuff. And Lord knows what else I would be doing if crypto was not in my life.
Yeah, I will say though too, like I think what you learn over the years is the best trades I ever made were no trades. It was always just stacking sats, buying ETH early, and just holding them, like that. Those by
Mhm.
far were my best trades. Like, I think I did well with Azuki. I got into CryptoPunks late. I did buy low, but it went even lower. So like if you try and time that stuff, like with meme coins, on Odin Fun, I interviewed Bob Bodley. So I went on there just to play with it and probably made like $1,000. I'm like, yay. But it's because I just happened to interview him in the first couple weeks of the thing because I was curious. So I'm 100% with you, but it makes you learn that stacking sats is the most important thing. And just getting into the kind of eternal art culture is the most interesting thing. And I love that your article, like, I just thought it was so well written. I keep alluding to it and I always try and put it off because I love to hear about where you grew up, how you got into it and everything. But this article is so well written. We got to just dive in because I think it's going to catapult us into like 100 different places. So for everyone out there, if you have not read it, again, follow proper underscore double underscore. I got to question you on that one, but at proper. And it's called On Ordinals, and it's really well written. So tell us what was before we get into the article, like what drove you to write this? Because clearly there was like you had to get it out on paper, and there's a definite strong POV here.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in general, I've tried. I feel like I do my best writing when I feel like I have to write about something, that fundamental need. And this was probably the truest form of that. Like I've written plenty of threads and long form posts and whatnot over the years. And generally speaking, when I do that, I'll just, I'll spend a day or two just when an idea of something that I want to talk about pops in my head, I'll add it to a list of notes. And by the time I actually sit down to write it, I'll have all these kind of distinct independent ideas that I have to figure out how to tie back into one another. But with this, it was literally I just sat down and started writing, like no outline, no nothing. And um it's also why it feels I at least to me feels like a much more distinct or not unique, but it feels very different from what I've written in the past, whether it be opinion pieces or informational things or whatever. And it was looking at kind of the commentary that has been going on the entire extent of kind of the existence of the Ordinals ecosystem, but also as a result of it, seeing it to start to subtly change. At the time when I put this out there, it was kind of like the sky was falling, dwindling market activity, and to some extent, obviously, right now people are like talking about, oh yeah, like all these big Ordinals collections are up on the day, and it's because of all this macro news around Bitcoin in the U.S. and all that stuff.
Right.
But in general, it was just, sentiment was not great. And for to some extent, when that happens, it a lot of the commentary just ends up devolving into kind of petty dunking on, name calling, and just like instead of actually sitting down and thinking about it, it's like, okay, how can we take out the extract some engagement out of this? And then it was also I think it was Zach XBT posted something in reply to, I believe, Udi, or maybe it was Udi replied to him and then Zach replied back. I can't remember now. But basically, Zach XBT, obviously a very large personality, just given the work that he does.
Yeah.
Um, and he does not have great things to say about ordinals. Um, and it's definitely started sort of kind of an internal conversation within the ordinals ecosystem, but also I saw a lot of people outside of the Ordinals ecosystem who may know what Ordinals are at maybe a tech level, but aren't day to day in the Ordinals ecosystem, and seeing kind of their takes, agreeing with Zach or kind of adding their own perspective on it. It just kind of showed me that I think the main thing that it showed me is still just like how distinct these communities are. Um, and it's unless you're actively involved in kind of both Ordinals as an ecosystem and as I outlined in that, primarily Bitcoiners who, by design or like by fundamental beliefs, do not try to get involved in other ecosystems versus people say who are all spend all of their time within the Ethereum digital art scene or wherever may not know what's going on the Bitcoin side of things. And it was more so, it was just a really just wanting to give context to both sides of like, here's where we're at. And also this, instead of kind of being a part of that kind of petty dunking on and name
Right.
calling and engagement baiting as the market went down. It was like, actually, let's take a step back and think, why are we where we are? Um, and for that matter, I do think for as as petty as it can be, I think that said dwindling market activity actually had some pluses in that people were starting to question like, what the heck do I own? What the heck was I propping up? And you did
Yeah.
see a lot of people say like, hey, I'm not going to focus on runes or BRC20s or some of these new, pump fun on Bitcoin or whatever, and I'm just going to go back to
Right.
the
Own
fundamentals,
fun.
aka collecting art. Yeah.
What do you how do you
Yeah.
think because I know you're obviously you love ordinals, and this to me was an ode to ordinals, but it's saying like, hey, I love counterparty too. I love on-chain ETH art. I love digital art. And your point was like, dude, everyone out there, this has been digital art's been around since like early computers, since what, like the late 60s, early 70s. Like I grew up with this thing called Logo where you'd like move a little cursor around and you create these awesome moire patterns. Like digital art has been around forever. How do you think, like, because you're tapped into other communities, how do you think the Ethereum or Tezos or counterparty, like how do they see us in ordinals?
I think like again, I'm probably gonna say this 100 times over the course of this conversation, but they truly are such distinct communities, right? And anybody who rides that line between the middle, it can, certainly see that. But if you spend all your time on kind of one side, wholly on ordinals or wholly just in the broader digital art scene, then it's very hard to actually grasp like who's doing what and like what is going on. And just the other day, I was talking to somebody about and like, where does a lot of the conversation on ordinals happen? And I said, oh, well, I mean, a lot like the broader digital art space, it happens on Twitter. But if you don't follow people that are only in the ordinal space or, are just hardcore Bitcoiners or wherever, you would not know what goes on in the ordinal space just
Right.
because of how distinct these communities are.
Well, and how the
Um,
algorithm is
and-
so good at like bifurcating us into these tiny little groups, you know what I mean? Like now that I'm not in ETH as much anymore, those people, they slowly a lot of the crypto punks have slowly pruned me over time, and I've slowly pruned them over time. Not that I don't know what's going on there, but I want to, like, I'm just, the more I'm into ordinals, the more immersed I get into ordinals. And you said something really interesting. You were like, ordinals people don't like look at any other chain anymore. Like once they're there, it's like they've arrived. They're almost like their own brand of maxi in a way, like like a Bitcoin and then an ordinals maxi on top of that. So we're in this little, we've put ourselves in this ivory tower where you're saying ETH and other folks, collectors or artists or whatever, they'll dabble on ordinals. So like they know it, they've poked around at it, but they might be dabbling in other chains too. So it sounds like you're saying there is kind of a one-way door into ordinals where a lot of us, once we go in and we drink the Kool-Aid, we don't leave, whereas other places know it better. Is that a fair summary?
yeah, I would say so. Stephen Rice, who I'm working with at Encore now, he he did a response piece, and one of the things that he was talking about is making the distinction between the really hardcore Bitcoiners who ever since they've entered the space or just crypto assets in
Right.
general, they've wholly been Bitcoiners. They have these hardcore beliefs into sound money and just so on and so forth. But then the distinction between those types of people who are into ordinals versus the people who came to ordinals from, say, Solana or like even Cardano, which at the time was news to me that Cardano even had an art scene. But those types that have they're kind of like the new age of maximalists, right? And the way that Stephen put it was um, not false maximalism, but basically new age maximalism without kind of any sense of reflection and why are you coming from other kind of smart chains where quality of life is different, ease and accessibility
Right.
are completely different. What it about Bitcoin now that makes you interested? And I don't think there's any. clear answer for that. And for that matter, maybe you don't necessarily need to have an answer for that. But it is interesting thinking about, what is it about now that people who were the stark contrast to what Bitcoiner ideal beliefs are, and why are they now holding those beliefs while still kind of taking those things from other chains and trying to apply them to Bitcoin now, whether it be digital art or fungible tokens, meme coins, whatever it might be.
So you're saying a lot of the art and a lot of the patterns too, like the way allow lists were handled. Like you're saying, so much of it has been recycled, and those who were there in the the early ETH NFT days, from 17, 18, 19, and obviously 21 was probably the ETH peak. It sounds like you're saying so much has been recycled. We might have new words for ours, but a lot of it is kind of keeping us in this bubble. It's a good bubble, and you're a huge Ordinals fan. Obviously, I am too. That's why we're sitting here. But all the same, there's a lot of things that are unique to Ordinals. But there's a lot of things, especially with the distribution and the influencers and all that stuff, that's just been recycled from ETH and 20 other places.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the truest form of that right now is just the fact that, I mean, I've seen more people talking about this lately, but it's something that I've been thinking about too, where Ordinals, there is not, a true one-on-one market on Ordinals. It's like if you're coming to, obviously, we've seen a lot, stuff go to auction as one-on-ones or kind of private sales and whatnot. But in terms of the kind of dedicated markets or kind of one-on-ones or just smaller edition works for that matter, it still is a very in a nascent place on Bitcoin. Obviously, you have Gamma with prints, and you can also auction off kind of the original inscription that the
Right.
prints are based on, but it's definitely not the core focus. And I literally just had someone the other day who is a collector and kind of artist in their own right asking me like, hey, if I wanted to release kind of one-on-ones or a very small series, like where would be the best place to do that? And I told him, I mean, I think Gamma, but realistically speaking, I don't know. And it's because, yeah, I think it's just a good, more all the credit to Gamma. Love their team,
Uh-huh.
love what they're building. Excited to see the launchpad. Not in any way
Right.
kind of a negative comment on them. But I think it's more so just indicative of it's still glaring holes like that are certainly a sign of a lack of maturity. Um, and it's, whether it be the people really care about the networked effects of collections right now. And, I say that in the piece too, where it's like, it's a market wholly determined by the collectors rather than the creators, which is why you see all of those same kind of mechanics applied to every mint without any consideration for the context or intent of the work. So that means larger collection supplies. You see whitelists and allow lists. You see collab managers. You see all these things that if you want to have any
Yeah.
sort of, if you really want something to be successful, aka like bring in a lot of collectors and have people mint out your work or whatever, then you almost not you don't always have to do that, but way more often than not, you have to do that. Um, and I think there's certainly are groups that have gotten around that, like Counterfeit is one that comes to mind that they're totally like consistently releasing kind of series of artists that you don't not really they're not worrying about those mechanics, and they have not had a huge problem of like maintaining interest in
Right.
these artists' work. But for the vast majority, it's like you really have to like work your way in, network, do the whole whitelist, allow list stuff, and collab managers pump up those supply numbers just so it's you can have a low entry for and if people want those network effects and things like that. But yeah, I mean it, yeah, I do think on the high supply note, we're starting to see some of the artists who like leaned into that start to realize that it ha is having a negative effect, and you are starting to see a pullback on that to some extent. Which, when I say lack of maturity, the reason I think I wanted to post this is, and for that matter, writing part two of that piece is, it's like I think right now, even with such little attention, and all the jokes flying around about, oh, the 15 people still in the ordinal space. It's like it's actually right now is a very good sign, which is kind of a whole conversation in and of itself. It's like people are learning lessons right now. People are, um, I don't know. It's a lot of what I'm like. How I think about it is seeing how things played out on Ethereum in 2021 and kind of thereafter, and it's almost scary how much things like track so well to kind of the trajectory of like that crazy run up, and then if some of the horror stories and like messages I've read over the years, just like in the block talk and art blocks Discord, or just in Grailer's DAO, and seeing some of the commentary and just like literally rock bottom. I'm like, that's why I'm just not remotely concerned, but also at the same time actively thinking like it's good that we are rinsing ourselves of these things that have been going on in the space. And even for that matter, petty name calling and dunking on and all that stuff aside, I think it's really good that you're starting to see a space that is not afraid to call out some of the really suspect people, projects, and just works that have been able to prosper in a time when people were just kind of euphoric about, oh, we're doing all this stuff on Bitcoin.
Yeah, there has been a good, like everything's been down and low lately. I mean, it pumps and goes up and down, but there's been this because Bitcoin's ripping. We're kind of in this weird ordinals. We're like, well, are we back? I think we're back, but I love when there's kind of a reset button because I feel like some of the more grifty projects that have huge influencer models and they just like, and people still buy into this, but I think then it, like you said, there's almost a reset button and then you see smaller projects that actually do take off. So what would you give your buddy who wanted to do a one of one? Obviously in this space, you've got to have some sort of connection to an X network to, if you really want to like come out with stuff and sell it. Like I love what Psychonaut and RG are doing with that, because he's not like, obviously you want to sell out, but he's doing real small collections, sometimes like just one of ones, like 8 of them at a time. And it's kind of like building up over time. It sucks that an artist like an artist is going to be more successful if they're influential on X and can keep people engaged, keep the algorithm engaged, and grow a following. I guess that's true in life. And the standard art community is I just read that $12 million stuffed shark. I'm like, oh my God, that's the most dysfunctional freaking place ever. This looks like perfect compared to it. But what advice do you give a new artist here? Because it is so hard to break in. Like, do you just tell them do art for the love of it right now and then just build your network? Like, what do you do?
I think it's a really good question. And so, um, you know, I, I think there's kind of two paths that you can take as an artist kind of coming into the ordinal scene. It's you either, work with a group who has those kind of deep roots in the space. And that's certainly the easier way to go. And I think for the vast majority of artists, that probably is the way to go. Just because otherwise it's like it can certainly be a pain. You don't know where to start. You don't know who to talk to. Um, I think there's certainly been artists who have done it very well doing it on their own. One that comes to mind is Harvey Rayner when he
Definitely.
released his series Chat Fucker. Like he spent months building up kind of, his own kind of Bitcoin native collector base, and kind of, built a team. That team was like really making inroads within the community. And because of that, he kind of built his own kind of Bitcoin native collector base, having come to Bitcoin, never released anything on Bitcoin. And he spent all that time doing it just to make kind of, I guess, that side of it that much more fulfilling. And, generally speaking, from an art perspective, that I think that much more of an ingrained community. Um, it's obviously, Harvey Rayner is not kind of, he certainly has made a name for himself pre
Yeah.
Ordinals. Art Blocks curated, and he's released a number of series since then. So obviously it's for someone like him, it's probably easier to just say like, hey, I'm Portrait Raider, and then people are interested to some extent. Which is why I say for the vast majority of artists, it's otherwise like very hard to go that route. Um, I think in terms of teams out there that are really, you're not seeing it as much now. There definitely were groups that just kind of slapped art on Bitcoin onto their name and their project or whatever, and they just certainly had those connections, but weren't really doing right by artists. Primarily, kind of the overused word I like to use in that regard is LARP. Like there certainly were a lot of LARPs in the space for a while, kind of running art
Yeah.
on Bitcoin projects or platforms, whatever.
Right.
But I mean, now you're seeing there are a lot of great groups who are able to make those connections, handle that transition for artists in a much clearer and kind of right by the art way. Art Cube, Inscribing Atlantis, Singular.art for what we were doing,
Yeah.
but obviously now part of Ancora.
Vivid.
Um, yeah, Vivid, exactly. A lot of groups out there that are, you know, Gamma, obviously, who we've
Yep.
already talked about a little bit. It's
Gamma
certainly
is
a
an
great
interesting one
group.
though because they have a lot of artists on their network, right? Like they're able to put a lot of people on. I would think it would be very challenging for them to kind of be the place to launch and accept tons of artists, but also to curate smaller. And I think they're making inroads at that. That's a tough one because I mean, let's be honest, like Magic Eden kind of dominates secondary because people don't want to go to 10 different places for secondary. And it's, to me, it's kind of sad and too bad. I almost wish whatever we want to define as fine art, maybe early ordinals and Harvey, chat fuckers and some of these collections that are just, we know if ordinals makes it in 10, 20, 30 years, stand the test of time, that these will be among the grails, right? Like I wish there was a place where those were traded outside of Magic Eden, but there is a convenience, and with only a 2.5% fee, they've got the best mousetrap right now, right? But so it's just interesting to see how this ecosystem's evolved and how we've kind of had to play within it, because kind of to the winner go most of the spoils, and that's how it was. I ran one of the first app development companies in the world back in 2008. Like it's the same thing, but now it's just playing out way faster and on steroids because iterations and coding and building is so much faster now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, especially from a community perspective, I do think for the artists that want to go the route of kind of building up their own collective base, it can actually have a lot of ripple effects. I mean, just to use it again, because it's a great example, what Harvey did with Chatfucker. I mean, Alex, she came from Proof, and then she was helping Harvey out as part of his like team for Chatfucker. And I believe she's handled kind of the community side, and now because of that, she works at OCM. So it's like you have someone who was on the Ethereum side,
Right.
knew of Harvey from that side of things. Harvey spent all that time working on building up his collective base, and now you have another person working at a Bitcoin native company who has that context from kind of the broader kind of blockchain enabled digital art space. Um, and it's all, I mean, that's one example top of mind, but I mean, in terms of the artists that are doing that and able to, for the artists that Harvey knows and can introduce to Ordinals, it's like, look at this collector base. And I don't know, I feel like more artists going that route has kind of rippling effects for other artists.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there's also another artist that's kind of the flip side of that that comes to mind is Mia Forrest. Mia Forrest is a phenomenal artist. She does a lot of kind of biosensor based art. And actually just yesterday announced her latest work on Bitcoin. I'm blanking on the name of it. I literally just read the thread earlier this morning.
Don't worry, Base Chain's listening, and he is like a wealth of information. He will know, and he will post it because he's probably
Mhm.
one of my favorite people to follow as far as what's going on with ordinals and different collections and really digging deep on that stuff. So Base Chain, hats off to you. But it's interesting. So like in ordinals, are we? Do we suffer from the same thing that our Bitcoin maxi brethren face? Are we collectively Ordinals maxis? And if so, should we be apologizing for that? Should we have a more multi-chain approach? Because like you said, it's a one-way door. Once we go to Ordinals, many of us, especially those of us who were in Bitcoin in the earlier days, a decade ago, come back. To me, it felt like home. And I wrote that to you on your post, your awesome article. Are we maxis and does it matter?
I, I feel like, I mean, it just depends on who you ask, right? Where you talk to, I think a large kind of cohort of people will say maximalism in any regard is kind of an ignorant approach versus if you ask other people, people are going to say maximalism, whether it be on Bitcoin or if you're an EVM artist and you care about doing, really hardcore on-chain stuff on Ethereum, it's like I think there's certainly what's the word? Uh I can appreciate someone who is steadfast in their beliefs, if that makes sense. Yeah, for that matter, I think I think a great example of that. I saw Aaron from Inscribing Atlantis was in the chat, and the first time her and I ever met in person, it was like fundamentally at odds with each other's opinions. Like I made it clear I'm not an Ordinals I'm like an Ordinals maxi or Bitcoin maxi, and at the time she had said that Bitcoin um like she believes that all chains are testnets and that kind of the digital kind of on-chain culture and whatnot will come back to Bitcoin over time. And I think two people at odds who I have a great amount of respect for Aaron, even if I just inherently disagree with that opinion. I think there are very few people who are doing more for art on Bitcoin, like the folks at Inscribing Atlantis.
Right.
That's just the one that came to mind because I saw her in the chat. But
So
I don't think there's
let's pull on
anything
that
wrong
thread
with
a little. So
maximalism, to be
you
clear.
so you think so Aaron's contention obviously isn't in, I mean, in Aaron and Kay, obviously Casey invented the space, but I think what Inscribing done, what Aaron's done is been so great for the space. And you also said something interesting that in ordinals now, especially since they've been down for a while, that a lot of people aren't afraid to kind of speak their minds and be honest about it. They might get some flack and crap for it, but they do it, right? And I know like Aaron and Casey obviously have kind of removed themselves from the day to day, which I think is great because it allows them to be super honest and they never take a hypercritical approach, but they do approach like, oh yeah, this mint seems kind of like same old, same old. They're not afraid to go there, and it allows other people not afraid to go there. Because what I found in Ethereum, kind of before I left, like I said, I got a CryptoPunk much later, probably in I don't know, 22 maybe, but I found that the people in it, there was a lot of great people, but the core group of CryptoPunks kind of controlled the narrative, and it was already like it already felt like it's the same reason I would never join a country club just because I like playing golf because if my loafers or shoes are last year's model, I don't care. Like, in fact, I'd rather be wearing flip flops anyway. You know what I mean? So to me, to be able to express myself and to do whatever I want, whenever I want, and if I get flack for expressing it, or if I'm wrong and people call me out, that's fine. But you should never be afraid to express yourself. And I think Ordinals does have that. Thank God.
I think you make a really good analogy there with the CryptoPunks community. I mean, it's kind of like in the way that Bitcoiners, in terms of their beliefs, make almost make Bitcoin their personality, right? In the same way that there's certainly a corner of the CryptoPunks community that makes owning a CryptoPunk their personality. And if you're not like one of those people who has those really hardcore beliefs, then it's too like too you said it kind of had it turned you off a little bit in the same way that I think Bitcoin is hearing about kind of EVM, art maxis or EVM art maxis hearing about
Right.
Bitcoiners kind of ideal set of beliefs. It certainly turns them off too. Um, there are plenty of communities like that where it's like there's plenty of echo chambers in the digital art space, whether it be Ordinals maxis or be, CryptoPunks
Right.
or be like terraforms, or or in the early days, there was on Super Rare, for example, there was a cohort of collectors that would not collect an artist if they did not have if they were not accepted to release on Super Rare and had stuff listed on Super Rare. And it's like looking back on that, it's like, what the hell were
So
we doing
cringe.
there?
Yeah.
It's yeah, I mean that's obviously not a knock on Super Rare. It's just like obviously there's way more interesting stuff out there than just
No,
Super
but it
Rare.
also shows
It,
you that it happens very easily, as open-minded as we think we all are. Because I mean, even I'm sometimes susceptible, not as much anymore, but even sometimes on the timeline I'll see a bunch of people post and I'll be like, oh, that's cool, maybe I should get that, maybe. And then you're like, wait a second, this person's totally being paid for this. So is it like you know how the sausage is made, so you're like, okay, you know what? I'll bet you when there's no focus or attention on this now, like I'll bet you if I wanted to buy a Taproot Wizard in 6 months from now, I'll bet you I'm going to get a better price than I am today. Like at some point, the focus isn't going to be on that. The coins will be dropped. And if I want one, I'll get one. Otherwise, there's very few collections out there. CryptoPunks being one of them. Obviously, Bored Apes to a certain extent, they've come way down. But had you gotten in early, you would have been done great. Azuki, Pudgy Penguins, but most of them come down to earth, right? Punks is really the only one. It came down pretty low into like 20 ETH, but it never fully came down. It's the only one that never ever kind of came down to earth. And maybe some of the old, like some of the art block stuff, and I think Chromie Squiggles came down, but what's the really early one over there? Like some of those obviously have remained insanely high. So, but that model has not continued, especially in ordinals. Like you said, when I see a collection of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,000, I'm like, oh God, like, do we really need another 4 or 5,000? Like, give me like Stephen Miller, like with Behold. Like, I love it. It was a passion project. I think there's like 400 or plus or minus total. Like, make it a small number. And do whatever you want, but like to try and go, obviously we saw Good Things and Polymath get pretty badly burned with a 4,000 collection. And they hit the market at the wrong time too. But, at the end of the day, like not everybody's buying anymore because they're also seeing Bitcoin go up and they're like, oh shit, I don't want to miss this boat. What people always forget is you cannot look at the price of any of your art in anything but Bitcoin, right? And if Bitcoin does go to 300,000, is my Bitcoin shroom or my ordinal punk going to go up with that? Maybe. Probably not though, probably not unless the ordinals market and the amount of people in ordinals grows massively. And it sounds like you're saying where your difference with Aaron was, you don't think without a lot of us getting together and kind of trying, you don't think it will just naturally grow on its own?
I certainly am in the state right now where it's um, the only thing that's I don't even think there necessarily needs to be a fix or anything. It's the only thing that's it, as long as things play out as they are right now, I generally think that the ordinal space will be just fine. I mean, I feel like one thing that people forget about that crazy run that, blockchain digital art had in 2021 was that Ethereum was racing to $4,000
Yep.
as that was happening. And so I'm not sitting here saying it's like, oh yeah, you should expect your art bag to go, super nuclear if Bitcoin races to 200K or anything. But it's like, you see a lot of people talk about like, oh yeah, sell everything, sell all your bags if ETH and Bitcoin are going up. And I'm
Right.
like, the one precedent that we've had for that is like literally the opposite. So again, that's not trading advice.
When you say the
Like I said, I
opposite,
think
because I remember Bored Apes and Azuki, like basically, I think ETH peaked at 44 or 4,800 or something, and Azuki and Bored Apes were going right along with it. But once there was a fissure in the price of ETH and it went down below 4 again, both of those just started, especially Azuki at the time, just started going down very quickly. It's almost like when it's going up, it's euphoric, and you're like, because it's priced in that. But once a little bit of a drop in the underlying currency happens, then that's when people are like all of a sudden FOMO brain falls apart for a second, and FUD brain takes over. And they're like, and they all panic sell at the same time. Is that what you were inferring?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to give out any trading advice, so anybody listening, do not listen to me. Um,
Don't worry, no one listens
but
to me either.
yeah,
We
hey,
just we just state our opinions. That's all we do.
yeah. I mean, but I will say it's the kind of inverse of that and seeing kind of the fallout of that. I think if you ask anybody in kind of the broader blockchain digital art space, primarily on Ethereum, they will tell you that, yeah, it's not great to like spend a lot of money on stuff and then watch it go down for like 2 years straight. But at the same time, if you look at the quality that came out of that, I think was that like that downtrend was the most beneficial thing that's happened and to the space like ever. Only because, you know, uh people became way more stringent about what they were collecting. It's like, I'm not going to drop more money on stuff when I'm already down on all this stuff. And it's like, I'm not going to be euphoric and just buy everything again. It's like, it actually made people sit down and, actually think about what it is that they're collecting.
Yeah.
And, purchasing without even the slightest notion of like, oh yeah, I could flip this next day for a 2x or whatever, which was the case in 2021. Like, or for that, not even next day, like 20 minutes later. Um, and I think something that I want to talk about in kind of part two of that article is it's going to be a little dicey. Like, I don't know if it'll actually play out just because of kind of the renewed attention in Bitcoin itself at the moment. But, something that I think would do the ordinal space really good, do really well, would be kind of having that prolonged state of just, you know, downtrends, sales, people like, no, like kind of, it was just a moment in time where people are actually like forced to truly consider what it is that they're doing instead of just kind of continuing that full circle loop of just rotating from the next thing to the other and like just ads in and out and all this stuff. And again, I don't know, like I think there's nothing better that has happened to kind of the broader blockchain and digital art space than that happening on ETH, and it literally took years to play out. Um, Maybe it'll be shorter if it does happen on Bitcoin, just because it's fundamentally a different, smaller community. It's a fundamentally smaller community. I don't know, but I think just from a long-term health standpoint, something like that would be very beneficial, and actually like just forcing the collectors that are here to actually think about what the heck it is that they're buying and collecting and talking about, and for that matter, understanding the context of where ordinals lie, whether it be in pre-ordinals on-chain works on Bitcoin, or as a new perspective that has followed up, you know, the on-chain art kind of, not revolution, I don't like using that word, but on-chain kind of movement happening elsewhere that was started elsewhere, and now ordinals are able to be a part of that too.
Do you think like Ordinals is obviously small. We haven't seen a ton of user growth like we would have expected to. Obviously, I know you're sick of we're so early, we're so early. It's like, dude, the digital art, we're not early. We're just recycling stuff. But there is a totally cool new spin on Ordinals. So yeah, like in that sense, like, yeah, you're early to Ordinals. Why did Ordinals stay so small and not really grow? Is part of it because ETH folks, are enmeshed in their CryptoPunks or Azuki or Pudgy Penguins communities and are just like, they're happy over there? Or is it because 10-minute block times and there's a lot of wonkiness to Bitcoin? Or is it the maximalist attitude of Ordinals folks where just whatever we think that we're the only game in town now, once we've figured this out? Like what is it? Why is it so small?
I mean, I guess kind of what I was just talking about, the point in time in which ordinals kind of came came to be was really in the middle of that kind of downturn on the Ethereum side of things, or just broader space side of things, at least in terms of digital art. And so it was like when everybody was just kind of down bad from a sentiment perspective, and people had gotten rinsed and all this stuff they had spent exorbitant amounts of money on in 2021.
Right.
Um, Ordinals coming along, and then at a surface level, effectively repeating those things.
Yeah.
It turned off a lot of people. I think part of it is also a case of loudest voices in the rooms. Like talking to artists and collectors, and I mean, even like some of the digital art fund managers on the Ethereum side, when you would get that perspective of saying like, I tune into X, Y, and Z space, and all I hear is like this person who is like a known grifter on the Ethereum side, or whatever, just an example like that. Um,
Well, and we
it
do
just like
know
it's
in
hard for me to
Ordinals,
take the
a
space.
lot of the people who came over and were successful were like mediocre influencers on the east side. They came over, they set up camp, and I'm not going to say who they are, they know who they are, but and they successfully made probably a lot of money off the early Ordinals folks. I know you're smiling, but it's true. And the it was rinse and repeat, and it happened, and some of those people actually cleaned up their reputations, and they contribute to the space, but some don't, or they're kind of a wolf in sheep's clothing. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And I mean, it, I think at the end of the day, it's like no one is, not no one, but it's the thing that is going to change that is, it's just like if you're like actually thoughtful and like doing things within the context of where ordinals and Bitcoin are at, and in relation to kind of its lifespan, and also the broader digital art space, it's like artists and collectors are always going to be interested.
Right.
It doesn't, people think that like, oh, that means they have to come in and buy X, Y, and Z collections, and that means that they're part of the Ordinals ecosystem. But it's like when I think about the really hard in digital art collectors and creators and whatnot, that and seeing, at this point, I've talked to like hundreds and hundreds over the past couple of years, um, and like seeing what they gravitate toward. It's like things that I don't think most people in the space like think about very often. I mean, the one caveat to that is, or outlier to that, is Sense, like very well known Ordinals collection. But also I've tweeted out probably sometime like last year, and I said there's been no single project that has converted more hardened collectives from other chains to Bitcoin as Sense. Now, beyond that, like the collection that I've seen actually bring some of those collectors over, it's like timestamps by the Runart team, so Gordon Berger, Daniela, and all of them. So that was Oria Harvey, who is as OG of a net artist as they come, Ivana Tao, great AI artists, um, and just kind of the collective group and quality that went into that.
Right.
People were interested in it, like used runes in an interesting perspective that was not just trying to get it onto Bitcoin's own pump fund. Tests
Which
by John,
collection was that?
timestamps by Runart.
Oh,
So
timestamps. Yeah.
yeah, another great example of that is tests by John Preventure, who was part of our All at Once exhibition last year with Verse and Gorilla Zhao. Um, it's like apart from Sense, it's like the collections that I see most people gravitate toward and actually think about as being an interesting application of this medium are things that are not consensus. And I think people
What
are,
do you mean are
when
not
someone says like
consensus?
it, consensus, as in whether it be PFPs, like the top 10 by volume, or when you see people say like, oh, I want to, explore art on Bitcoin, here are the things that, what art should I check out? And then you see the kind of the same 10 collections done over and over and over again
Right.
suggested. I don't want to say the names. I'm not trying to disparage anybody.
No, no.
I'm just saying that like, it's just like things that I see people gravitate toward are things that I honestly feel like a lot of the people within the ordinal space don't think much about. Um, uh, Yeah, I'm trying to think about other collections. I mean, Astronomer's Daughter is a good example.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Postbook is amazing. Love Astronomer's Daughter.
yeah, Revenant by Travis Leroy Southworth, another great example. I mean, not that's I guess disclaimer there. I'm like by far the largest holder of the Revenant. So I have to. I'm not just shilling it. I own it because I really like it. I'm not shilling it because I own it.
Right.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of collections that unless you know about them, you probably wouldn't really hear about them all that much. Um, but I think are like fundamentally the most interesting applications of the medium thus far. Obviously, there's Rip Cash, there's Thank UX, there's kind of those like really well-known artists from outside of Bitcoin who have come in and done kind of interesting projects on Bitcoin as well. But I would say those are also more outliers to the mean than they are kind of a standard of any sorts.
Yeah. No, this is cool. The Revenant is beautiful. So this is one of your favorites right now?
Yeah, the Revenant. So what Travis did was he took kind of news articles from the entire like Bitcoin's life and basically recorded the title, date, publication, so on and so forth of when Bitcoin was declared dead by, a talking head or journalist or whoever. And that in and of itself isn't kind of a new concept. It's like you've seen plenty of projects that deal in all the times that Bitcoin was declared dead. But I think in terms of actually recording like data about, the publications and, who was saying what, the price of Bitcoin at the time it was declared dead, combined with kind of these ethereal ASCII gifts, like what you're looking at here, um, that I can't really tell, but they might look better if you blow them up, which you don't have to obviously. I think it is probably the most well-rounded package I've seen of kind of tackling that comment. Um, Again, just as a disclaimer, because I don't want anybody trying to call me out or anything. I
Oh
am
no,
like by
no.
far the largest
That's
largest holder of this
I don't
collection,
care.
just because I love it. So
I
I'm not trying
appreciate
to
the
shill it or
disclaimer,
anything.
but yeah, I mean, it's like you're trying to show something that right now has a floor of like $50, or $200, whatever. I think, and you're being totally honest about it. Now, I mean, you're right. There's so much cool stuff because like I didn't even know about this collection. So Travis, awesome stuff, dude. But you're right. Like all the top stuff, there's no shade to it, but it's just like it is the same. Oh, Bitcoin sure must have sold. It is the same. It's the same PFP philosophy that kind of took over Ethereum. And I my theory with art and just groups and everything is the first thing people want to do is belong to a group. And once you feel rooted in a group, I think that's when you start to really get in the art. And not everybody kind of crosses that chasm. A lot of people, the mops aren't. They're kind of, I don't want to say they're posers, but they don't care about the art or what moves them. They want to be a part of the group. And the beauty is with PFPs and with Bitcoin or even on ETH, like if you're into stacking sats or ETH or having running validators, like to me, this is the social layer of crypto where it brings people closer together. We could talk about art and culture, and hopefully you've got mostly, ETH and Sats or whatever you believe in, and number go up eventually, and you get to retire all happy or use that money for your day-to-day living and family's happiness, right? So to me, this whole thing is a social layer, but there's so many cool things. Like you just told me one or two that I hadn't even heard of yet because even Ordinals, our teeny little ecosystem, there's so much stuff on here that I just don't know. Like, do you think you and I are in the same boat? Because you said earlier, you said Ordinals, like, it doesn't really matter what we do now. Do you think Ordinals in 20 years will be one of the dominant recognized forms of kind of eternal art on the blockchain, or not necessarily? It's just going to be another flavor.
I don't, I try not to speak in absolutes in the same way that like
Do
I
it.
don't know what I'm gonna have for I don't know what I'm gonna have for lunch today, much less like what's gonna be the case in 10, 20 years.
What's your gut?
Um, I do think yeah, it's gonna be maybe maybe it also depends on what upgrades happen to Bitcoin.
Right.
Maybe people, I mean, you would see people talking about annex scriptions now, which I've only seen like one or two tweets about, but the same way that there are already like 50 different meta protocols for fungible tokens on Bitcoin. Like, do I think or know if ordinals are going to be a dominant form for preserving art in the future? They very well could be. I think when you think about, I think it's specifically for things like art, though, where it's like this other stuff that you see people trying to put the square peg in a round hole with the protocol with and building kind of sub protocols above it or meta protocols above it, whether it be alkanes or BRC20 or things like runes. I think just fundamentally will not have kind of lasting power because it's things where the main value proposition is trading. I just don't see making a ton of sense kind of on Bitcoin on one. It's a things where they're illiquid by design. You care far more about the permanency than you do about, trading
Right.
or ease of access to it or anything. That's what's going to be the most, valuable thing in my mind, at least as a aspect of the Ordinals protocol.
Do you think
And
early ordinals matter? I know Counterparty was way before that, but do early ordinals matter at all?
not by the sake of them being early. I mean, I think that actually, I mean, the weird kind of nuance of that conversation is I think actually one of my favorite collections that's ever been in, like I've seen to date on Ordinals
Uh-huh.
is something this artist, he inscribed it himself, 50 pieces under 100K. He has never publicly said anything about it. I'm just like, please let me talk about it. Um, but it's like there's a lot of really great stuff that's
What
um
is it? I want to pull it up.
I don't think I have permission to.
Okay.
Obviously I don't necessarily need permission, but it's literally like easily top three favorite projects I've seen on Ordinals today.
And the
Um,
artist has never sold it, never mentioned it, nothing. There's 100 pieces or 50 pieces, all sub. What'd you say, 100K?
yeah, sub 100K and it's 50 pieces. And but I mean, I tweeted about this. I think probably sometime last year, where I said, kind of as an extension of what I said in that article is. If the value is in being early, it feels like the early inscription conversation is more hinged on the proliferation of the Ordinals protocol itself rather than anything inherent to kind of blockchain assets
Uh-huh.
or on-chain art.
Right.
I think as we are currently seeing right now, Ordinals have definitely been the most prolific form of putting art on chain, even in its short time frame. Obviously, with Counterparty and Scribe and all these
Right.
protocols that came before,
Right.
some of which are still around and actively being used, and for the ones that have come after, like Stamps. Um, I think if you, I think the early inscription conversation and the value that lies there is entirely hinged on the proliferation of the Ordinals protocol as a dominant protocol for
Right.
putting art on chain. Now, whether people accept it as that dominant protocol, remains to be seen in my mind. Um, I mean, anybody who says it's like people see it as that right now are either ignorant or lying to themselves, frankly. Um, but I think it certainly is there, and I think it could be the case.
Do you see it as the
Um,
dominant protocol on Bitcoin?
on Bitcoin, yeah, sure. I mean, at the very least, to my knowledge, at least, I mean, a great example is Pepe Permanent by Chain Left,
Right.
Chain Leftist, who it was a pre-Ordinals counterparty asset, but if you actually dig into the technical details, it's like it is more on chain than um, Ordinals are by default. And I mean, I we obviously don't need to have the conversation about
Well, I got a
how
whole
on chain is
episode.
it
I got a
because
whole episode on it. So yeah, we talked about
it's
this
it's a
stuff quite a bit.
very it's a very nuanced conversation. I think there's something very unique, at least from just as a prospect for by default everything is stored entirely on chain, and Obviously, right now you have kind of the emergence of things like compressionism and whatnot on Ethereum, where people are playing around with these
Hmm.
ideas, and you actually have Tezos zero contract, which is I just looked at that the other day because it sounded like at face value they were doing something analogous to inscriptions, but um, there it's like now you actually have the emergence of on-chain assets on Tezos too, which is in and of itself a bona fide art chain. Um, yeah, I think for the status of Bitcoin itself, and also as a standard for, by default, putting all data needed to recreate a work entirely on chain, for a lot of works, it is arguably the best standard out there. I think that there are a lot of works that still could only exist within the EVM, or there are plenty of works that only exist within Bitcoin. And it's, as we have said time and time again, it's very much just a new perspective.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Um, do, do we as a community, like, do we have a responsibility to try and grow ordinals, or is ordinals going to do what ordinals does? I fell in love with it. You obviously fell in love with it, among other mediums, but it sounds like right now that ordinals is your main focus. Like, do we care about growing it, or does it just do we just have fun, have authentic conversation here on the mother chain and art on the mother chain, and if people want to find it, great. If they don't, that's fine too.
I don't think there's like a right answer to that, right? Um, at least for me personally, and for that matter, us at Emporia, I mean, we certainly do want to start pushing for like a deeper level of conversation, which is why when I posted my article, you saw Orderly, you saw Stephen Rice, each post their own kind of long form responses to it. And the whole point about that is like, yeah, we could just post it as like a blog post on the Encore website at some point. Cool. But it's like the whole point is getting that conversation out there and helping facilitate it for that matter. Um, I think noise aside, a lot of people would be very surprised about how many artists are still like actively exploring Bitcoin. And maybe it's not the right time. I mean, I like most of the artists, as someone who was running a platform for the past 2 years and now is part of another platform, both focus entirely on Bitcoin. Most of my conversations in that span with artists have come from not me reaching out to them reaching out to me or getting connected through other people to me or us. Um, and I think in that regard, it's like you could make the case that just keep doing what you're doing. Like
Yeah.
people are clearly interested. Um, I think obviously given the position that I have slash we have, there's almost a necessity that you shouldn't just like keep on doing what you're doing, and you should actively try to like help kind of things yeah, help the space become more mature in your own way. But I don't know. I feel much like most things in life, a middle ground is like a perfectly acceptable thing where it's like if you see clear needs, you can try your best to like fill those needs. But at the same time, at least from what I see behind the scenes and like what's actively going on, I generally think that we're on the right path. And kind of as I said earlier, that downturn in number of participants and activity on
Hmm.
collections and whatnot, I think is actually like a very good sign.
Yeah, 100%. So let's shift gears. We've talked about it and we've danced around it, but tell me about Ancora. What are you guys working on over there? It's super cool. Obviously, I'm looking at collections. I recognize a lot of them. You guys are doing great work. How did Ancora come about, and how is Ancora helping ordinals?
Yeah, so um Ancora is kind of comprised of a few different teams, or I guess kind of putting a name on kind of the aggregation of a few different teams. So you have Eki, who co-founded Arties, which is they handled the Belvedere project with Hardo Floor Forums last year. You have Ordinally and Stephen Rice, who were part of the Inscribing Atlantis team.
Mm-hmm.
They were also part of Ancora. Then you have me, who was a co-founder at Singular.art, who is now a part of the Ancora team. And it's really, I guess, kind of concentrating a group of people who are very well aligned on, for example, what I was talking about in that article, which is why You see kind of Steven and Ordinally riffing on what I wrote, just more trying to do it in a more public way.
Right.
Um, I think initially, at least in Core, the website's gonna the actual full-on website could be going live sometime soon. Um, but the idea, at least to start, is kind of a trusted partner for more traditional, which say what you want about that word, but museums like the Belvedere with Flora Forge, or uh, museum in Austria that they partnered with for arrangements by Ana Maria Caballero. Um, being that trusted partner and then also like helping be a bridge for people such as artists or collectors or whoever, and being a platform that can really just like do right by the artists and do right by collectors, and you know as the Twitter bio would imply, accelerate art on Bitcoin, which I think is the ultimate goal here. It's like taking things from kind of that neutral perspective and just like leaning into the medium as much as we can, leaning into the culture, leaning into tech, and just doing cool stuff. You know what
Right.
I mean? Um, part one aspect of that is at some point we want to kind of formalize a commentary arm. So you see me writing every now and then. You see Steven has been doing a lot of writing, and he just actually posted something today, which everybody listening should go check out. Um, Same with Ordinals and writing more, and just kind of formalizing that into kind of a commentary arm. I, I mean, I guess remains to be seen, but one kind of side that I also want to build out is kind of an in-house labs approach, which is, pardon my French, but very much a fuck around and find out kind of experimentation arm.
Okay.
Um, and so we have a few kind of in-house ideas floating around there. That's kind of far down the road. First and foremost, it's just kind of being a trusted partner for releases. So our own infrastructure, our own tech solution, that at least when it's kind of fully built out, I think will be, something that's dually needed within the space.
So are you going
Um,
to have a launch pad as well?
Correct, yeah. And so, and actually, for that matter, I can't say too much about it yet, but we'll be within the next few months or so, we'll be bringing out the first kind of not the first, but I guess the next release under the Encore banner, which the hope for it is that it will be done on our own infrastructure. If you recall back, the arrangements release was done on Magic Eden. It was a free mint. Um, but moving forward, the goal is to kind of start using our own infrastructure more and more. I mean, as someone who ran Singular Art for a while, I kind of prided ourselves on having our own infrastructure. And I think part of that was just based off of the curatorial vision of, you just have a lot more flexibility in what you do, what you're able to support for an artist, being able to integrate an artist's vision into how things look on chain.
All right.
If you run your own infrastructure, like, and actually lean into their like intent with the work. And so in terms of releases, we're still applying that like kind of highly curated thesis. And I think that just to be able to, as a platform, it's hard for me to take a platform seriously if you're not handling your own kind of, infrastructure and kind of own solutions for the distribution and kind of sales of an artist's work. And I'm not saying you have to, but it's like I feel like you can do a lot more if you have the ability to. And obviously, that's a lot easier said than done. We've seen a lot of even the best teams on Bitcoin absolutely flop when it comes to building out their own infrastructure, which indicates and signifies how hard it is to do so.
Sure.
But I think if you can do it right, I think it's ultimately the right direction for this space to move into. And you're seeing, I know Vivid has been experimenting with their own kind of infrastructure. Inscribing Atlantis has some great bespoke kind of technical infrastructure for some of their projects. We did it at Singular.art, so on and so forth. So it's just kind of continuing that kind of thesis.
Very cool. So it's a merger between curation, helping artists get on chain with collections, and also, like you said, with tech, and obviously the first thing we think of tech, at least with artists, is getting a launch pad and stuff like that. But it sounds like you're saying a lot of you came together to promote art on Bitcoin and to really grouped together to bring this experience on the tech and on the curation side to kind of raise the tide, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, apart from like actual releases happening on Ancora, I think one of the things that I've always kind of prided, at least myself on, or at least prided singular on before, was being able to just be kind of an open door for artists who, it's a, if someone has questions about ordinals or want to connect with ordinals, I'm always like open to being a reference or just kind of being intro to people, no strings attached, no pressure. And so a lot of kind of stuff that Core is already working on now, even in between releases, is like these artists that want to explore Bitcoin and kind of helping them do that with no pressure in terms of, oh yeah, it's you have to release with us
Right.
if whatever. It's nothing like that. Um, but yeah, this is kind of in reality just kind of being a trusted curation partner for doing cool stuff on Bitcoin.
Very cool. So it sounds like there's you launched it what, beginning of this year, maybe end of last year, and really made a big splash. Got a lot of partners involved, and it sounds like you're gearing towards this kind of second soft launch, if you will, with a lot more tools and tech to help further that vision.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much a slow and steady approach, I would say. It's it's we I think there's in terms of the team, it's like I think the approach that you see a lot of people take is like it would be very easy for us to just like accept a lot of projects and start pumping
Right.
stuff out and make a ton of money. That's certainly not the goal. And it's if anything, it's like the exact opposite is the goal.
Well,
It's
that'd
very
be
much a
tough in this
slow.
marketplace anyway. But yeah, exactly.
No, exactly.
That'd be a
And
tough
so
promise to
even
make right now.
yeah. Even market aside, it's like very much a slow and steady wins the race approach and making sure that, we're doing things not only well, but doing them right.
Right.
Um, and yeah, it's a lot of ongoing internal discussions about how best we want to handle things. And, it's like even the project that, or the work that we're planning on supporting soon is an ongoing, conversation about like, um, it's great to have a diverse, even though we are all well aligned internally. It's having a diverse set of opinions is I think great for everybody, and just making sure that we're being thoughtful about how we're going about it and hearing everybody's perspective is I think the recipe for success. So wouldn't expect us to be pumping out a lot of projects anytime soon, but definitely going to be doing thoughtful projects
Oh, cool.
soon.
And you guys have all been super, super thoughtful there. Will I see you in Vegas?
I will not be going to Vegas.
Ah,
I
it's too bad.
I have a wedding the weekend right before, and just yeah, the timing does not make sense, unfortunately.
Got it. Got it. Well, next time, next time. Well, Proper, it's so great having you on the show. Is there anything else that we didn't chat about, that we want, any stone we didn't turn, or you want to share where people can reach out to you like we did at the beginning?
That's a good question. I would just say be on the lookout for more writing from the core team, and that kind of continuing to help facilitate those conversations, as well as just in general, more updates coming from the Encore team. Um, if anybody wants to chat about any things that I said on this space, I know some things that I say may not be fully fleshed out ideas. So I'm always happy to chat about things and hear kind of opposing perspectives and whatnot. You can just send me a DM or at me on Twitter or find me anywhere really. Um, but yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and having me on.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Yeah, and keep writing, man. Like that was we need more people with more well thought out articles and thoughts, and obviously videos too, but there's something powerful about the article that is well laid out, and it's not afraid to kind of shine a light on some of the things that maybe make ordinals and us in our little towers and more myopic. And it's good to look at that stuff, because I'm here for it. And I got what you were trying to say. I don't know why people would give you shit about that. I've seen people write far more controversial pieces, and I thought it was just spot on. So yeah, keep writing, and I can't wait to see what you and Ordinally and Steven and the whole gang are coming up with here. It's fun to see.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to everybody seeing it too.
All right. Well, Proper, take care. Thanks for coming on, and take care, everybody. I think actually Steven, is it Reese or Rice? He's coming on next week. So this is going to be like the Ancora week. And I think Ordinally is coming on probably right after inscribing. So this is going to be a fun little going through all this with you guys. So take care, everybody. Proper, thanks again. And we'll see you guys around.
Perfect. Thanks so much.